Question 6, we have an algebra question. So the first question is, what is the coefficient of x in the expression? So what we've got to do is we've got to find x. So just x, okay? Just x by itself. Okay, so you can see it is in here. And the coefficient of x is everything that's attached to that x. Okay, so in this case, we have a 3 attached to it, and we have a y to the power of 3 attached to it. Okay, so the coefficient of x is just going to be 3y3. Okay, just write it next to each other. So it's just everything attached to that x. Write down the expression in descending powers of x. So descending always means biggest to smallest. And remember, the powers just means the exponents. Okay, so we're going to write from the biggest x exponent to the smallest. So the biggest x exponent here is x to the 3. Then we've got x to the 2. And then we've got x with nothing, so that would be x to the 1. So we're just going to write it in order. So we've got the biggest one we said is 2x to the 3. Be careful, we're looking at the exponent on the x only, so don't look at the exponent on the y. That doesn't matter in this case because it's just powers of x. So 2x, 3y. Then next up we have x squared, so 5x squared. And then lastly we have 3x y3. Okay, so we just write it in terms of biggest to smallest with our exponents for x. So we can see first we've got a 3, then we got a 2, and then we've got actually a 1 there. Okay, so if there's nothing next to the x, that's just a 1. Okay, 6.2, simplify fully. Okay, so we have a bracket there with a square. So the first thing we're going to do is let's write that. So x plus y squared is the same as x plus y times x plus y. Okay, when we multiply this out, remember, you've got to use, some people call it FOIL, or just remember we've got to multiply everything by each other. So FOIL means first we do the first term. So we're going to go x times x. Okay, and we get x squared. Then we can do the outer term. So that means this outside term and that outside term. Okay, x times y is xy. Then the next, so FO and then I stands for inner. So we need to do these inner terms. So y times x is xy again. We always just write it alphabetically. So although it's y times x, yx, we always just write the x first. So we always just write it alphabetically. And then lastly, the L stands for last term. So this last and that last. Okay, so y times y. So y times y is y squared. Okay, so sometimes the FOIL can be a bit confusing. Basically, what you have to remember is you have to multiply every single thing in the brackets by everything else. Okay, we get to this point. It's getting a little bit more simplified, but we can take it one step further. So what we can do is we can't do anything with this x squared. So we're just going to rewrite that. But then this xy plus xy, that's like an apple plus an apple is 2 apples. So we've got 2xy. And then the y squared can't do anything with. Okay, and that is our 3 marks there for that one. So the reason why it's 3 marks is because, let's quickly mark this. I've used too many colors here. So we would have got a mark for probably 2 marks for doing this multiplying properly, and then your final mark for adding those 2 up. Okay, and then 6.2.2 looks scary because of the fraction, but we just take it step by step. So with fractions, what I try to do is let's simplify the top, simplify the bottom as much as we can, and then go from there. So at the top, if we just look at the top, we have actually, we've got x in each of these terms. Okay, so you've just got to play around, see what you can do. So we've got x in each of those terms. So I'm going to take out a common factor of x at the top. Okay, so I'm going to say at the top, I'm going to have x as a common factor, and let's see what we have left. So x cubed, if I take away an x, that means I've just got x squared. X squared, if I take away an x, I've just got x. And then 2x, if I take away an x, I've just got 2. Okay, I know it's not looking simpler yet, but it is a step. That's already a mark that you've got. At the bottom, let's see what we can do. So at the bottom, this is something you've got to be aware of because it's something they can use to trick you. So at the bottom, we've actually got dots, so difference of two squares. So when it's like this, so it's a square number, take away a square number. When it's like that, we always have this form. So it always becomes two brackets. We take the square root of the first term. So x squared, the square root of that is just x. We put that in the front of both. And 1, the square root of 1 is just 1. So we put in both. And then we just put a plus in 1 and a minus in 1. Okay, so you can always do that. When you see that dots, you automatically put two brackets, put a plus and a minus, and you just put the square root, square root. Okay, so it's a little bit confusing, but they do often throw that in. So try remember that if you see two square numbers, that's how you can simplify it. Let's keep going at the top now. So at the top, we have actually now got a quadratic in here. Okay, which means we can factorize that quadratic. So we're going to keep this x in front because that hasn't changed. But now we are going to try factorize this quadratic. So we're going to try and make it into two brackets. The bottom we're going to keep the same. So x plus 1, x minus 1. At the top here, this x squared plus x minus 2. How you work for quadratics is you always put an x in the front. Okay? And then how you read it is you've got to read it backwards. So you've got to go factors of 2 that differ by 1. Okay, because there's a 1 in front of that x. Okay, so let me just make a note of that somewhere. So you go factors of the last number. So factors of 2. If there's a minus, then you say that differ. If it's a plus, you're going to say that add up to. So that differ by 1. So the factors of 2 is we can say 1 and 2. So those are the numbers that go into 2. Okay, so those are the numbers that we're putting into the brackets. So 1 and 2. And then the only thing you've got to play around with is you've got to have signs. So if they are different signs like this, then you know it is going to be different signs in the brackets. You've just got to test to see which signs are right. So what I would do is I'll just put it in randomly, a plus and a minus. And we're just going to test this part. Okay, so let me get some space here. We are just going to test to make sure we get back to this original quadratic. So if I have this x minus 1, x plus 1, let's multiply it out using that FOIL again. So x times x is x squared. X times 1 is 1x. Minus 1 times x is minus 1x. And minus 1 times 1 is minus 1. Okay, simplify this. So we've got x squared. 1x minus 1x is nothing x. And that means we're left with that. Okay, this is not what we started with. Okay, so we know that the signs are then in the wrong order. Okay, so if you get that it's not the same as this one that we had, that means you just got to switch the signs. So this one then, let's change it in a different color. So this is going to become plus 1 then. And then this is minus 1. And that means then it will work out. Okay, so quadratics are always a little bit strange. You've got to just plug in signs and test if you get the same answer. So I'll just show you just for demonstration. If we then do it with the new signs, so x plus 1, x minus 2, we're going to get x times x is x squared. X times minus 2 is minus 2x. 1 times x is x. And 1 times minus 2 is minus 2. If we simplify this, we end up with x squared minus 2 plus 1 is minus x minus 2. And that is the original quadratic that we had. Okay, so then we know that the signs are right because we get back to this one. Okay, so we do get this one. So we know we've done it right. Okay, stick with me, we are nearly there. So we've already probably got 4 of the marks out of this question. The reason then, you'll see why we had to change these signs, is we can then actually do some cancelling. So we can actually say, well, this x plus 1 at the top, we can cancel that with that x plus 1. And I think that's actually as simple as we can go. So let's rewrite this answer. So far then, we've got x at the top. We've got x minus 2. And at the bottom, we've got x minus 1. And I think that is as much as we can do. So as crazy as it looks, that is our final answer. Okay, so I know a question like this, when you see that 6 marks, it seems really intimidating. But if you could even pick out, so even if you say you didn't know how to do the quadratic, if you could maybe label and say that is a quadratic, this is difference of 2 squares, that could be marks just for being able to point that out. Dots is one you can get easy marks on. So if you can figure out how to do the difference of 2 squares, you can always get this part right then. And you've just got to keep playing around with it until you can cancel as much as you can. Okay, I hope that helped. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions.